What's going on, man? Welcome back to the basement. I'm Ron, aka Smooth as Butter, aka the Blue-Eyed Man Dragon. And I just recorded this, a whole intro, even almost did the first player. And I realized I didn't even mention what we're going to be talking about. Today we're going to talk about playoff schedules. We're going to talk about my top 5 league-winning running backs that have the easiest schedules down the stretch, because that's a lot of, the content you guys want to see at this point. We're past, trade targets. I can give you guys, rest of season stuff, playoff schedules. A lot of you guys like the playoff schedule type videos. So I think I did a poll and you guys wanted to see this. So that's what we're going to get into today. Now, depending on how this video does, we can go into, league winning wide receivers, running backs with bad matchups, wide receivers with bad matchups. Let me know down below in the comments what else you guys want to see, because outside of top 10 lessons learned, waiver wire, running back starts, and wide receiver starts, we have like 2 or 3 open spots for, dynasty trade targets, playoff schedules, rest of season rankings, all that good stuff. Now, if you want access to my rest of season rankings, all that good stuff, that'll be on Patreon, patreon.com/Ron Stewart. It'll be down below in the description and in the comments, so make sure you check that out. Now, as always, subscribe if you're new. Leave a like. It helps us out a ton. Let's stop rambling. Let's get straight into the video. Let's go.
Thirsty, trying to choose. I know I'm pretty cool. My nitty bag.
Now, first up, you guys are going to be mad at me. Those of you guys that have been out here, true OG subscribers that have been here since, the summer, like early summer, like June, July. I put out a video, like the cheapest workhorse running back. It was a little bit of clickbait. But we're going to talk about Javonte Williams. You guys hate when I talk about Javonte Williams. I keep gassing him up, and we're still, we're in week 13 now, and it hasn't paid off. If he does exactly what he's been doing this entire time from a points per game perspective and the season ends, he's probably a negative at where you drafted him. But we drafted him because he has the potential to be a league winner. And like I said, I've been talking about it to the point where it's obnoxious, but I'm going to need Javonte Williams to pay off, because you guys are going to be very mad at me because I've been conducting this hype train. But here's the thing. Javonte Williams, why I have him as a potential league winner in 2021 is because, I'm not going to list like Jonathan Taylor or the given guys, but I want to talk about guys that have really, really nice schedules down the stretch. Now, with Javonte Williams, he just put up 20.1 fantasy points. Now, I also want to remind you guys, he just did really well. He's now outsnapped Melvin Gordon 2 weeks in a row, and we now have this scenario where Javonte Williams can realize his full potential, because I just want to remind you guys, rewind 365 days, Jonathan Taylor was the RB 26 in points per game from weeks 1 through 12 with 12.3 points per game. Javonte Williams right now is the RB 33 with 10.8 points per game. So in the same time span, they're about the difference between RB 26 and RB 33, like a point and a half apart. Jonathan Taylor, to this point last year, was a disappointment. There got to a point in time where, starting him was frustrating. There was times where, if you guys remember having Jonathan Taylor last year, there were some really dark spots. There were some dark periods during that time where it seemed like Jonathan Taylor wasn't the guy that, we were promised when he got drafted. And, even in dynasty circles, his price was going down. But from that point on, from weeks 13 through 17, he was the RB2 in points per game with 26.1 points. He went from 12.3 points per game to 26.1 points per game. I think now, fellas, we got Melvin Gordon, doubtful for Sunday. Now, obviously, we're not preying on injuries, and I don't want to hear anything. Here's the thing with kind of my strategy. I'm doing a lot of rambling in this video, but I don't care. With my strategy, or the strategy that we've been doing, hero RB and kind of waiting on these dead zone running backs, is we draft these later running backs. Like I have, like my most owned, best ball running backs, guys like Alexander Madison, Darrell Henderson before the Cam Akers injury, AJ Dillon, these prime workhorse running backs that are just one injury away. Now, a lot of times when those happen, it's like, oh, but that injury happened. It's a fluke that you won on that. The whole part of me liking Javonte Williams or me liking Darrell Henderson or AJ Dillon is because you have to calculate the outs of these players, right? So when you look at these players, what are the scenarios where that player could win out, right? With Javonte Williams, his outs are he plays so well that he beats out Melvin Gordon. He has another out where the Broncos start losing on the back end of the season, they're out of the playoffs, and they just say, okay, we're going to roll with Javonte Williams, let him, develop before this next season. Or the third scenario is Melvin Gordon gets hurt like running backs do. It's not a fluke to bet on running back injury when it's so prevalent. We saw it this year. We saw it this year with McCaffrey, Saquon, Dalvin Cook, Kamara, Derrick Henry. Even last year, you had guys, did Joe Mixon miss time? I believe Chubb, maybe Mixon. Man, I'm blanking on that. I think Saquon got hurt last year. Christian McCaffrey got hurt last year. Chubb got hurt last year. There were a lot of dudes that got hurt last year as well. It's not like this year has been a little bit worse than it usually is, but running backs on the aggregate, on the totality of things, get hurt. So now we have Melvin Gordon, who's hurt. Now, it doesn't seem like a long-term injury. It seems like he's doubtful for this Sunday. He probably doesn't play against the Chiefs. And then from there, if Javonte goes out here and plays really well, then it's wheels up. It is wheels up. He just had 20 points. He has now outsnapped Melvin Gordon twice in a row. We're looking at the ascension. If we can just get liftoff right here, he has a clear runway. Because when we look at this schedule, I put the schedule right here. This is kind of going to be the format for this video. But we have Kansas City this week. Tough matchup, but a little bit easier. That 21 is a little bit, misguided just because 21 is the highest number on that list. If I put 32 there, 21 would be like yellowish. Now, he has a little bit of a bump this week because of no Melvin Gordon. With no Melvin Gordon, he's an RB1 this week. Then who knows if Melvin Gordon comes back, what that workload looks like when Melvin Gordon comes back. Then we have the 4th-ranked defense at home against Detroit. Layup. Now, that red line is where most of my playoffs are. Weeks 15, 16, 17. Decent matchup against Cincinnati, 14th-ranked defense. Then you have Las Vegas and LA Chargers. Now, these rankings, I probably should have mentioned this. Detroit's allowing the 4th most fantasy points to opposing running backs. Las Vegas is allowing the 8th most fantasy points, and the Chargers are allowing the 3rd most fantasy points to opposing running backs. So he has a lot of juicy matchups. That is 2 matchups against bottom 5 teams against opposing running backs, and another matchup against the team that is allowing the 8th most fantasy points to opposing running backs. So the schedule is there. All of these stars are aligning for Javonte Williams, where 20-point game last week. Snaps are ticking up. Melvin Gordon is hurt. Now, if he falls flat on his face, I'm going to look like an idiot. But I truly do believe that the process has been sound with Javonte Williams. He has a runway to take off for the playoffs. Now, we've spent way too much time talking about one player. Let's move on to James Robinson. And James Robinson is a guy I like because obviously the schedule looks nice, but I think this is a weird, I wouldn't call it like a theory because I'm an idiot, but the idea I have is James Robinson, his only problem, so he had before the heel injury, bell cow, passing game work, everything was James Robinson's. Then he gets his heel injury, he comes back, Carlos Hyde kind of works in the passing down work. Last week, Carlos Hyde saw 80% of the 2-minute drill. He saw 80% of the long down and distance snaps. So he was the pass catching back for whatever reason. Carlos Hyde's never even been that guy. I know that Kyle Shanahan used him that way in San Francisco for 1 year, but he's never been known. He's a between the tackles guy. But I like this matchup this week where you guys can see they're playing against the LA Rams, who are allowing the 19th most fantasy points to opposing running backs. That's not good or bad. It's about a neutral game. But they're going to be 13-point underdogs to the Rams in LA. The Jaguars are going to be behind all games, so I think that might kind of, jumpstart things where they're going to be in the game script already where they have James Robinson in the passing game, and with that many targets and opportunities for James Robinson in the passing game, I think it can just kind of get the spark plug going for James Robinson, then boom, he's back in on the 2-minute drill and the long down and distance snaps. I don't know if that makes sense, but in a game where there's going to be a lot of passing opportunity for James Robinson, it kind of makes sense for me. Now, after that, he has an easy schedule where it matters in the playoffs. He has a tough schedule against Tennessee, who's only allowing the 28th most fantasy points per game to opposing running backs. But then he has Houston, who is allowing the 6th most fantasy points to opposing running backs, and then the Jets. So those are 2 games. That'll be the first round of the playoffs, second round of the playoffs, where he can go out there and be nuclear for you. James Robinson can go out there against the Jets and rush for like 120 yards and get 3 touchdowns. That's within his range of outcomes. James Robinson could be one of those guys that could advance you into the championship. Now, he does play the New England Patriots in Week 17. A little bit on the tougher side, but we just want to advance. He has a nice playoff schedule. I'd say of the guys listed on this list, maybe one of the weaker playoff schedules, but I still like him as, potential league winner type guy. Then we have Elijah Mitchell as our 3rd running back I want to talk about. And Elijah Mitchell, James Robinson last year was better, but Elijah Mitchell is becoming, that cornerstone, 0 RB, hero RB, waiver wire pickup. Now it sucks. One of the leagues I have Elijah Mitchell, I drafted him. If you guys remember, I gotta pull up that one video. I gotta give myself a little bit of credit. What video was it? It was one of the videos at the tail end of the offseason. I was like, keep an eye on Elijah Mitchell, maybe pick him up. And I drafted him in 1 or 2 leagues where they're like 20 rounds deep. Like, I wouldn't expect you to draft Elijah Mitchell in your home league that has like 16 roster spots. Even like it was probably bad process to draft him in those type of scenarios. But I got Elijah Mitchell in one of my FFPC leagues. I have him. It sucks because I also had I had Joe Mixon, Elijah Mitchell, Christian McCaffrey. McCaffrey's done for the season, so that really, really hurts that team. But Elijah Mitchell right now is peaking at the right time, and he has one of the juiciest playoff schedules on this entire list. He just put up 27.8 points coming off a finger injury, and that was with 27.8 points with Deebo Samuel stealing 2 rushing touchdowns. Now we have Deebo Samuel hurt. We have Elijah Mitchell, kind of really getting on fire here, especially with the Seahawks coming up right now. The Seahawks are allowing the second most fantasy points to opposing running backs, and the 49ers are a run-heavy team. They are 5th in rush attempts per game, and they're super efficient on the ground. So when you have Elijah Mitchell, kind of spearheading that rushing attack, man, he also has that league-winning potential. Like last year, I had one video where I kind of mentioned this, but obviously like Jonathan Taylor, Eckler, all those guys are like givens to be, league winners. But last year, the guys that came out of nowhere were David Montgomery and Jonathan Taylor off the top of my head as 2 guys that if you had a team of Jonathan Taylor and David Montgomery, you could have gone out there. If you had Jonathan Taylor, David Montgomery, and Stephon Diggs, you could have gone out there and matched Alvin Kamara's Christmas Day. Was it Christmas Day or like Christmas 6 touchdown game or whatever? You could have gone out there and matched that. Now, I think Elijah Mitchell has the puzzle pieces to be one of those guys, especially because you got him off the bench, right? So you got him off waivers, and now you have a scenario where he has a really easy schedule. As you guys can see, he has the Seahawks that are giving up the second most points, then the Bengals who are giving up the 14th most points, then playoffs, he gets the Falcons who are giving up the 10th most points. The Titans are stingy against the run, but at the same time, it's almost game scripts independent when it comes to the 49ers running backs, because no matter what, Kyle Shanahan is going to run the ball, hold on to the ball. He has a set script of plays that he's going to run for that first drive. He's always going to be wanting to pound the rock. Then you have in the championship, Houston, who's giving up the 6th most fantasy points to opposing running backs. They're going to run the doors off of Houston in that game. And the hidden upside with Elijah Mitchell is Deebo's injury. Now, I have Deebo. Deebo is my most owned player. Now, that's going to come off a little bit surprising. I had one guy comment like, oh no, it was on Jamar Chase, but I had one guy comment about like, oh, you have all this, because I did that one video where I showed all my fantasy teams. Deebo Samuel was like that last wide receiver in a tier I really liked, and I didn't even have him ahead of consensus. He just slipped in a ton of these FFPC drafts I did. I ended up with like 5 or 6 shares of him. He's like my most owned wide receiver, so it sucks that he's injured. But for Elijah Mitchell, if Deebo Samuel, he's missing 2 weeks. So now that is 2 weeks, right? So that's the Seahawks, Cincinnati of no Deebo. And Deebo was taking away rush attempts. So now he has the backfield all to himself. And then it sucks to say this, but Deebo's always been banged up. Back to college, back to his rookie year, back to last year, why he wasn't good is because of injuries. It sucks to say because Deebo's such a fun player to watch. He's such a good player, but these injuries catch up with him, and I wouldn't be shocked at all if his injury goes from 2 weeks to 3 weeks to 4 weeks to, okay, he's going to play in the first round of the playoffs, stuff like that. So if Deebo misses an extended period of time, that's even another, boost for Elijah Mitchell. Now, our 4th running back on this list is going to be the man, the myth, the legend, the guy that I tear down every draft season, David Montgomery. And it's funny because I've never liked David Montgomery, but it's in this landscape of, every running back just sucks and everybody's hurt. And, if you just have Leonard Fournette, you have a top 5 running back at this point, which is crazy to say. But David Montgomery, given the landscape of the position, is in a spot where he just saw 20 opportunities. So that's carries plus targets, and he only put up 10.4 points. The thing is, though, that he's seeing 20 opportunities in a game. He's seeing like 17, 18, 20 opportunities. He has this bell cow role where he's seeing all of the long down and distance snaps, all of the 2-minute drill snaps. He's getting most of the carries. Like, he is operating 85 to 100% of the snaps. He is operating as a true bell cow. Now, his team sucks, right? The Bears aren't scoring a ton of points. Not a really good offense, so that's what's holding him back. But he did it last year on a bad Bears team, right? He was the RB2 in points per game from weeks 13 to 16 in 2020. He was one of those guys you needed to have to win it all if you didn't have Kamara or Kelsey or Stephon Diggs, those guys that went crazy on the back half of the season. And given his schedule, he's set up to do it again. Now, okay, Arizona's tough. Green Bay is tough. Both outside of the top, both giving up like the, I think like 10th least or lower in fantasy points allowed. Arizona's giving up the second least fantasy points to opposing running backs. The thing is that if you can sneak him into the playoffs, he can be that hammer for you because the Vikings are giving up the 9th most fantasy points to running backs. Seahawks are giving up the 2nd most. Giants are giving up the 5th most. That is a really easy schedule on the back half, and that is how he did it last year because he had games against like Minnesota and Green Bay, teams that were really bad against the run last year, and he just ran wild on all of them. So the schedule's lining up, his usage is lining up. I like David Montgomery to be, he can be a potential league winner as well, given his schedule. Then our last running back on the board, or on this list, is one that I don't feel great about because we haven't seen a stretch from Clyde Edwards-Helaire where he was like a running back one. I think you can say for the rest of or besides Javonte, but Javonte's a rookie. Clyde, you can't really say that he's had a really, really dope stretch. Like maybe the beginning of last year, like the opening game against Houston, he played really well. But it's tough. The thing is that this schedule, he doesn't have a single matchup against a team that is allowing like the 15. So like the middle of the pack in allowing fantasy points to opposing running backs is 16 out of 32. He has the easy side of that all the way through, and he has 3 matchups against teams that are 8th or lower in fantasy points allowed, or 8th or higher in fantasy points allowed. Raiders, Chargers, Pittsburgh. Those guys are getting ran through. And it's tough, again, because Clyde, he hasn't really shown that he can be, that guy, league winner, but he was a first-round pick at running back. He's going to get some of the volume. He's not going to get all of it. Darrell Williams is going to get some of the passing down work. The thing is that the Chiefs were really bad in the beginning of the year. They're still in play for a 1 seed. I could see them, really getting hot, scoring a ton of points, blowing teams out for what happened in the beginning of the season. And they have to have this stretch against the Raiders, the Chargers, and the Bengals. Those 3 teams, those all have shootout potential. You can get into a shootout with Herbert, Burrow, Derek Carr. Those games could always be fun where you could play at home against the Raiders and win like 42-33, something like that. So it's in Clyde Edwards-Helaire's range of outcomes where the Chiefs offense gets hot, and in turn, he just scores a ton of touchdowns. Like, it's not wild to say, so he has 5 games left. It wouldn't be wild if it wouldn't shock me at all if he scored like 8 touchdowns during that span and was, a top 15 running back option. Kind of like what Leonard Fournette is, but not really at the same time. But yeah, I don't mind Clyde Edwards-Helaire as a guy with a really easy playoff schedule that can go out there, make some noise, probably on the lower end compared to the rest of these examples, but he's one to look out for. Now, that's going to do it for us today, fellas. I'm about to hop off here, upload this, and then go update the Dynasty rankings. So all you guys out there that do startups and are Dynasty sickos, I know a lot of you guys are new to the channel, or not new, but guys that subscribed in the summer, but literally from the Super Bowl to Combine to NFL Draft, 80% of my content is Dynasty. So if you are a Dynasty, diehard, you love Dynasty, I'm telling you guys, I love Seasonal. I love Seasonal more than Dynasty, I'll be honest with you guys, but I do love Dynasty as well. A lot of you guys know I have put together a huge database. I have all these Google Sheets. I really go hard when it comes to Dynasty, fellas. I'm about to do a huge update on the rankings for, it's like, week 13. Every 4 weeks, I've been updating the rankings for Dynasty. So Superflex leagues, all that good stuff. Going to run through, update all those. So that's going to be really fun. If you want to check out the Dynasty rankings, that is also included in everything. So the seasonal stuff, so my seasonal rankings, rest of season rankings, weekly rankings, Dynasty rankings, trade advice in the Discord, all that comes in the Patreon for $5. So that'll be down below in the description. Will be down below in the comments. Make sure you check out the Patreon. And if you're new here and you want to show support in another, area, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and I'll see you guys in the next one.
I got the juice, I got the juice.
Channel, Chatham's on. Foolies glad I'm home. Even my haters kinda glad I'm on. Rest in peace to my vagabond. Rapper, song, singer, suspended, subpoena from Mr. Meaner.